You have McGann, the Fangirl. Make sure you subscribe and check back every week for new fandom videos. I am ranking all 20 of the Pixar movies, plus Toy Story 4, so really 21 movies are being ranked today. Let me preface this ranking by saying there are really no bad Pixar movies, they're all absolutely gorgeous. That's why I did a ranking instead of a best or worst of list, because the worst Pixar movie is still better than a lot of other movies. Keep in mind there will be spoilers ahead, except for Toy Story 4, and you do not have to agree with my opinions. It's totally okay if you don't. So let's get started. Number 21. Surprising no one, The Good Dinosaur. Visually, this movie is spectacular, but from a plot standpoint, the story can't decide if it wants to be for tweens or preschoolers. I understand Pixar makes quite a few movies to appeal to really young kids because they're buying insane amounts of toys, but that doesn't mean that Pixar can get away with giving us such a flat, boring story. The movie goes with the concept that the asteroid didn't hit Earth to kill the dinosaurs, so now they're living with people, which is not only horribly inaccurate, but Arlo in general is such an unlikable character. He's so whiny that I can hardly stand him, even though this is supposed to be a movie about Arlo being forced into growing up. It's just too much. Then, aside from Spot, I found all of the characters really dry and dull and just not interesting. And while I'm totally willing to chalk this up for a film for kids 10 and under, that almost makes the fact that they kill off Arlo's dad worse. Seriously, Pixar, as a mother of 3, I've heard enough crying in my lifetime. I don't need more. And if you're gonna make a movie that is so heavily geared towards little tiny kids, we don't need death scenes in there. Arlo could have easily gotten washed off in the current without his dad's involvement whatsoever. And that is unforgivable. And with that muddled up, we don't know who we're making this movie for issue, that makes this the lowest ranking Pixar movie for me. Number 20, Cars 2. Again, visually this movie is outstanding, but plotline wise, why did this need to exist? The first Cars movie sold a ton of toys, and of course they're going to want to keep capitalizing on that, so I understand the marketing end of Cars 2, but we went from a movie where Mater was the side character to Mater being the main character and a secret agent for really silly reasons, and I just didn't find it enjoyable. Not to mention the fact that when Cars 3 came out, we have no hint of Mater still having his spy gear, so was Cars 2 even real, or was it a Mater's tall tales? I don't know! And not knowing annoys me. I really do want to give the writers credit though for how they handled Doc Hudson's death. Paul Newman, the voice of Doc Hudson, had died, so he couldn't come back for the sequel, of course, and instead of watching Doc die on screen or having our hearts torn out over it, we just saw Mater and Lightning reflecting on the fact that he was gone and how Lightning had to win the cup for him. And it was a somber moment, but it didn't rip your guts out, so I really appreciate that aspect. Thank you, writing staff, for that one. Number 19, Toy Story 4. This movie just came out, so I'm not going to reveal any spoilers in this video, but my spoiler-free review is that this entire movie is off. Well-established characters are acting way out of their normal character with no explanation or sensible build-up, and even some new characters do things that don't have real motive. For example, how Bunny and Ducky join the group happens for bizarre reasons that go against their own given agenda. Don't get me wrong, this video ranks low for me, but it's not a horrible or unwatchable film. There's actually quite a few great or funny moments, and I didn't hate the ending, but moments alone don't make a movie work. The overall plot of the film just didn't feel very strong, and it honestly felt like the writers didn't know how to write for some of the older characters. In fact, most of the original gang got pushed so far out of the main story arc that I found myself the most emotionally invested in Gabby Gabby, and the most entertaining were Bunny and Ducky. And that makes me feel like they should have just made this a spin-off movie called Other Toy Stories and left the original gang out of the script and settled in the ending of Toy Story 3. The bottom line here is that Toy Story 4 undoes a lot of things and feels very contradictory to the other movies for just 'cause reasons. So I personally didn't feel that this was a story that needed to be told. Number 18, Ratatouille. I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this because there's quite a cult following for this movie, but if you look at it, we have a rat who likes to cook, which, okay, I can follow along with that, but then he ends up in a 5-star French restaurant and can somehow control the human linguini by pulling on his hair. If the movie had taken 1 or 2 minutes to explain how that's possible, I would forgive a lot of the flaws with this film. But if you're gonna base a movie in the real world, have animals that can't communicate with humans, but can control them like puppets for reasons unknown, you gotta give me a little something to go off of there. I can only suspend so much of my disbelief, and truly, even though the movie's pretty, the story feels like it drags on in a lot of places, and I don't see this movie as marketable. I mean, you could make plush rats to sell, which, yeah, let's run out and buy some rats for our kids. Or you can make figures out of the human cooks, which are all really not attractive and kind of creepy looking. It's just not my favorite by a long shot. Number 17, A Bug's Life. An ant colony is getting picked on by grasshoppers, so the ant Flick goes in search of heroes to save their day. Using the exact same plot as the Three Amigos, Flick comes back with actors by mistake who have to pretend that they're actually these warriors now. Seriously, this movie is pretty much a ripoff of the Three Amigos, and even though it's a little different and a little fresh, it's really not a Pixar movie that most of us would pick first to watch. The characters are fun, the voice cast is A+ phenomenal, including an itty bitty baby Kyrie voice actress. And I did really like how they constructed that fake bird towards the end of the movie, but a lot of the movie is just predictable and it's just not as well thought out as its predecessor Toy Story, so it's kind of a forgettable Pixar movie. Number 16, Coco. Yeah, I hear you, this movie belongs a lot higher on the list, but the issues with the story just make me too nuts to stand. We have a boy who steals a guitar that takes him to the land of the dead, even though the guitar is not supposed to be magic at all, and he has to hurry home before he himself becomes perma-dead. There are so many bits and layers in this movie from a visual standpoint that are just to die for incredible. Accidental pun intended. But the manufactured tension just doesn't play well with the rest of the movie. Yes, we need tension in every movie to make it watchable and interesting, but they just go way too far over the deep end with Coco. 1, why does Miguel need to die at sunrise? That seems like a very frivolous time frame, especially since he's in the land of the dead via magic. 2, was there any need at all to have a true death? I mean, being dead isn't final enough. If you get forgotten, you can also die again and dissolve into nothing like Thanos snapped your name. It really makes you wonder if the land of the dead is even real or if it just exists in the minds of the living. And if the latter is the case, then this movie falls apart fast. And 3, this should have been a movie with no real villain. Ernesto de la Cruz didn't need to suddenly be so evil. There are successful people that are kind, believe it or not, and he went from this loving, I don't know you, but you're my grandson, this is amazing, I love you, to, oh, you could potentially hurt my reputation if people believed your story, so I'm gonna basically kill you now. It just didn't work. His character shifted too hard too fast. Plus, he didn't need to kill Hector. Hector could have died from some freak accident, and Ernesto just kind of snatched the notebook and went on with his life because it was the best opportunity for him. The whole situation could have been a misunderstanding with a bad choice that Ernesto made to not send Hector's family money and everything else after he got rich and famous. It could have been resolved. There could have been apologies. There could have been some kind of amends made. Instead, they gave us this Scooby-Doo plotline where Miguel figured out who his great-great-grandfather was way too quickly, so you knew that wasn't gonna be the right answer. I expect a little better from your plots, Pixar. Just a little bit better. Number 15, Inside Out. Riley gets jerked out of her home to move across country to California because her father takes on a new job. And there's a lot of questions about whether Riley is in control of her emotions or vice versa, but ultimately Inside Out is very ambitious, but it has so many little issues that just irk at me. Why are there only 5 emotions? Why can only sadness change the color of spheres? Why did it take so long for Riley to have mixed emotions? And is she even in control is the the person whose body they're inhabiting? If so, then who's going on the date? Riley or her joy or disgust or fear? It's really bizarre, you know? And I feel like killing off Bing Bong was a really cheap shot. This movie already had natural sad moments. We didn't need to manufacture one by, oh, if you're in this valley, you'll disappear. And guess who gets stuck in this valley? This character we introduced just to jerk him away and kill him. And I don't feel like it's symbolic of Riley growing up because I still remember who my imaginary friends were, even if we're not on speaking terms anymore. You don't just forget and erase things like that. And I really did not like that Riley's main tension in the story was that she was gonna run away to solve her problems. They rein it back in though, and she has these emotional breakthroughs, and I like that. I really do like that aspect of the story. But I remember sitting in the theater and the dads behind me were all chatting with each other going, I don't understand. What's wrong? Why is she upset? I don't get it. So it's almost like they didn't dumb this movie down enough. Number 14, Finding Nemo. There are so many things to like about this movie. Dad loses wife and most of his babies, so he really dotes and fixates and hovers and helicopters and makes his one surviving son miserable. Then surviving son gets captured and Dad has to go across the ocean to save him. It's a cute story. The actors were really good choices. The sea life all interact beautifully with each other. I especially love the tank gang. And I really appreciate the fact that this is a story with no villain and no romance in the main story arcs. You know, the dentist wasn't trying to be a bad guy. He thought he was saving a disabled fish. And Marlin had psychological reasons why he was kind of nutty towards Nemo. Plus, almost every character in that film has a disability, which is wow. And it's not just disabilities like Nemo's lucky fin. There's lots of invisible disabilities, which are disabilities that you can't see when you look at a person, like Dory's memory loss or Marlin's PTSD. And the film is just a marvelous sight to behold. The only issue I have with it is that the storyline seems like it's more geared towards 10 and under. Yeah, there's some adult humor in there, but it feels like this was another movie more for the kids than for everybody. Number 13, Cars. Cars is a cute concept, but come on, it was almost like Pixar said, how can we print our own money? Oh, I know, let's make a world out of vehicles and then sell those vehicles so that every kid around the world is buying little Lightning McQueens and Maters and Sallys and 1,000 other cars that are basically nameless in the film. And because of that, the film feels geared towards a younger audience and it gets a little tedious for adults after the 475th viewing in a day. Yeah, Archer really likes cars. But what I don't like about this movie is that the plot is basically Doc Hollywood just in vehicle format. I mean, really, if you look up the Doc Hollywood synopsis and replace the word doctor with race car, you get pretty much the same movie. Actually, let's give it a try. I'll just tweak some key words in the synopsis and we'll see how closely they match. Cocky young race car Lightning McQueen is off on a road trip to California in pursuit of a relaxed, high-paying career as a Dynaco race car to be rich and famous. But before he can pass the Mississippi River, he tears up the main road in Radiator Springs and incurs a community service fine to be served out at the local road by fixing his mess and working with Doc Hudson. Lightning is soon tempted to stay by a pretty lawyer Porsche named Sally. You see what I mean? It just feels like they recycled a lot of that story, and that's okay if it's geared towards a younger audience, but for us older people, it falls flat. Number 12, Toy Story 3. This is another one I expect to get some heat on for ranking it so far down the list, but I don't know what to tell you. I don't like that they aged Andy and that he got rid of his toys. That was just really tormentive to me, more so than the conveyor belt to the melting pit. And while I can appreciate in retrospect that, yeah, Andy grew up and he gave his toys to someone else who would play with them, which is really what the toys wanted, so he did what was best for them and kind of negated this hoarding issue that I think Toy Story caused me to have because I saw the movie when I was like 10. And then you're like, oh my gosh, my toys are alive and they love me. I can't ever get rid of any of them. Oh no. But in general, I just hate sad movies. So to get sucker punched in this movie right from the beginning when he's like, yeah, we don't have Bo Peep around anymore, I don't don't need that kind of negativity in my life. Real life is sad enough, thank you. Number 11, Finding Dory. I know so many of you are going to be annoyed that I have sequels ranking up higher than the originals, and that's such a no-no. But for the most part, Pixar really does sequels right. Not only was Finding Dory just gorgeous beyond compare, and hey, it actually came out on my youngest birthday, like he was bursting into the world on that very day. But they also kept up with the disability aspect and how that shouldn't stop you in life. The movie is all about Dory trying to track down and find her parents, and she goes through so much to get there. It's just, wow. Such a fun ride to see all these twists and turns and things that you don't really think are going to come next, so the movie keeps you on your toes mentally. Plus, I was also a foster parent at one point in my life, so this whole story of Dory losing her family and being hurt by it, I've seen that in kids. I can relate to that, and I think seeing that represented on film, even though it's from a fish, can really help kids accept and process and know that they're not alone. The only downside to that is that everything works out perfectly well in the end, and Dory has her friends and her parents in her life, which is not going to be the case for a lot of kids in bad situations, so it's one of the times I wish Pixar was a little more mean in their writing and sort of broke our hearts a little bit, just for the sake of showing kids that this kind of thing doesn't always work out. But at the same time, I really hate sad movies, so I forgive them for going with this sugar-coated, we all get along, we're all gonna be together ending. And the end of credit scene where we finally see the tank gang again really gets this movie bonus points for me. Number 10, Cars 3. It feels like Cars 3 took notes from Toy Story 3, but then did everything right. And there's a lot of Cars 3 that I really relate with as like this old lady on YouTube with all these young whippersnappers running around and I don't know what they talking about. Yeah, that got super hillbilly. I apologize. But in Cars 3, Lightning McQueen is basically getting outmoded and all these new race cars are replacing all the old racers, and Lightning just can't keep up. And he tries and he tries and he tries, but ultimately he can't do it, so he passes the reins over to Cruz. And I like that. It's not only what we've been seeing in comics a lot lately, where the superheroes are retiring and for whatever reason it seems to be all women taking their places, but Lightning didn't die, he didn't let his injury stop him, he kept fighting until he realized, why am I fighting? There was so much love towards Doc Hudson in that movie, and it was really sweet in that regard. And Lightning took his memory and said, maybe this is what I want to do. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do now. And I like that. It worked. You know, once upon a time, I was in grad school and I was going to be an animator and it was going to be the best thing ever. But then it got to the point of, okay, am I going to move out to a very expensive place with no money and no job and hope somebody will hire me eventually? Or am I going to try something else with my life and find a way to make my love of movies work for me as a career? And that's how I ended up on YouTube. That's why I'm here rambling to all of you. So yes, dagnabbit, Cars 3 deserves a lot more love and appreciation than it gets. Number 9, Brave. Pixar's first, and as of right now, its last princess movie. Princess Merida is this ancient Scottish princess that doesn't want to get married, but her mom says otherwise and holds a tournament to make her get married, only for Merida to run off into the woods, find a witch who gives her a tart, and ends up turning her mother and triplet brothers into bears because of said tart. And the movie loves to highlight that this kingdom hates bears, although who would really want a bear? You know, it's not like, oh my gosh, this cat, we hate cats. You would have to establish that. A cat's a normal animal. But who wants a big old dangerous bear in their home? Nobody. We don't need to fixate so much on how bad bears are to these people. But the voice actors are fantastic. The story's fun, even though it's a little on the nose and predictable, but there are a few places where it just doesn't really work. It was like Pixar wanted to make a strong, independent female princess, and I'm all for that, but then they set her in Scotland where it would not be natural for that princess to be forced into marriage. That's just not how they ran their kingdoms. And then in some effort to highlight how independent and free Merida was, they made her whole story about how she doesn't want to get married. Like the writers sat down and said, don't write about romance, don't write about romance, don't write about romance. And so they didn't have a romance for Merida, but instead, so much of her plot is still fixated around avoiding the romance. She should have just been a person doing her thing. They could have had some big party at the castle and the bear shows up and Merida wants to go out and fight the bear with all the guys or something. It doesn't have to be so convoluted about, oh, she needs her a man. That's a horrible Scottish accent. I apologize to all all my Scottish viewers. But I would have much preferred a story arc where Merida is trying to get in with the guys instead of trying to avoid picking a guy. Romance is great, it's fine, as long as it's natural for the story and it's not the only option little girls are ever given. So in that regard, Brave misses the mark for me. Number 8, Monsters University. This is Pixar's only prequel movie so far, and it's about Mike and Sully meeting in college and basically getting kicked out of college at the end of the day. I really like this movie because not only does it look cool, but it does a lot with the Greek system, which, hey, I was a Kappa Delta! And I really like the message at the end where they got kicked out of school and they didn't get it swept under the rug and reinstated as students again, but they didn't give up on their dreams either. They made it happen. They just had to start from the very bottom and work their way up to the scare floor. And as somebody who will probably have student loan debt their entire life, I really enjoy Pixar saying that there's more than one path to get to your goals in life. Number 7, Toy Story. This is when the ranking system gets really hard because all of these movies now are super top-notch in their writing. Cowboy Doll, who is his owner's favorite, gets jealous when a space ranger shows up and takes his place. Really, Toy Story is such a fun movie and it's so incredibly well written. Other than the toys being alive, nothing just happens, nothing just, oh well, we'll just plot hole right over that. I mean, the only reason Woody has a holster is so that Sid can slip that match in it, which saves the day with the rocket. They really thought every aspect of this movie through, and it's funny. It appeals to kids and adults. It's really almost a perfect movie if you don't notice the fact that they blink slightly out of sync. And see, now that I told you that, that's all you're gonna see. You're welcome. Number 6, Up. An old man loses his wife in probably the best montage that has ever been made in cinema ever, and then land developers are trying to take his house away. So to deal with the internal and external grief that Carl is getting, he inflates about 1 billion balloons and snatches his house up into the air to take it over to Paradise Falls, which I believe is in Brazil. Along the way, he finds a scout named Russell, a talking dog named Doug, a weird little bird named Kevin, and his hero, Charles Muntz, who turns out to be not very heroic of a person after all. Up is one of those movies where it's so whimsical, it's kind of okay to just go with the weird things in the story, like the talking dogs, or, that the house is floating away with balloons. Up is just iconic. The colors are stunning, and the story, even though it has some sad parts, like when you realize that Russell's family really doesn't spend any time with him, the overall heartwarming nature of the story more than makes up for the sad parts. And my kids are scouts. I was a scout. My husband was a scout. We're a huge scouting family. So I just love that Russell is a scout, and they sort of come up with this solution at the end that they don't really talk about, where, okay, you're an old person, you don't have anything to do, you're lonely, go be a big brother type figure to some kids in need. You never know what kind of impact you can have on a kid who's growing up and he doesn't feel like his family is really involved with him or really even likes him that much. And Carl kept trying to fill that gap for Russell even after they got back from Paradise Falls, and I love that. This is a brilliantly done movie. Number 5, Toy Story 2. Now, I will say from a storyline perspective, Toy Story 2 is not quite as good as Toy Story 1, but what I absolutely adore about this movie is how much fun it is and the ability that they went back in time to pull out this storyline that is plausible and makes sense. I always hate it when they make a sequel and it's like, wait a minute, this was never a thing. How is this suddenly a thing now? I think my favorite example was in Star Trek, I believe Insurrection, where Picard suddenly had this sound sensitivity that had never appeared before. Like, excuse me, you're just trying to fill a plot issue by making something up. But in Toy Story 2, we have this whole thing with Woody's Roundup and all these other characters and products that Woody never knew existed. And because it's all from the 60s, it really makes sense. Plus, believe it or not, Al's Toy Barn is shown in the first Toy Story movie. And even though they repeat some things that we see in the first movie, like instead of the Pizza Planet cups and burger, we have the traffic cones, the element of the cars interacting with the traffic cones makes it such a different thing that it's hilarious and I love it. Everything about Toy Story 2 is great. Number 4, The Incredibles. This is honestly the best superhero movie that you're ever gonna see. And trust me, I see a a lot of superhero movies. I've been going to see them in the theater since Batman in '89. I saw The Phantom, I saw The Shadow. I saw so many movies before superhero movies were really done well. And The Incredibles is not only interesting and lovely to look at, but it's different. Other than some rare occasions like maybe Superman and Superboy, we really don't see a lot of families in the superhero industry. Well, okay, I take that back. If you go into the comics, you'll probably find that tons and tons more than you see in the movies. But speaking from a movie standpoint, a superhero family is a unique concept that I was more than happy to explore with this film. And I love that they deal with the aging of a person. That makes it really relatable to so many different audiences, I think, because we start with Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl in their prime, and then they get married, and then we've got years later where he's kind of fat and he's not a superhero anymore, and he has to really work at it to get back in shape and do what makes him happy. But unfortunately, he ends up working for the villain, which again isn't a new concept, and we all saw it coming from a mile away. But the entire way that the film was handled was so unique and original, and I just adore it. Number 3, Monsters, Inc. This movie charmed me to no end. In Monstropolis, monsters make a living by going to the scare factory, entering through these different closet doors, and scaring the bejesus out of kids in order to harvest their screams, which they use as power in Monstropolis. And even though John Goodman as Sully and Billy Crystal as Mike Wazowski were fabulous casting choices, we all need to stop and bow down to Mary Gibbs for being the best little girl who has ever been captured as a voice artist. My understanding is that they followed around a real toddler and just recorded whatever she said and put it into the movie as Boo. I love Boo. She warms my heart. I adore her to no end. I can't even. She's like my favorite in the universe character from a film. This movie works and is so charming because of Boo. Not to mention, it's totally different. I've never seen any movie concept that takes the point of view of the monster in your closet. So this movie gets huge points with me for creativity and flat out cuteness. Number 2, WALL-E. Waste Allocator Load Lift Earth Class, also known as WALL-E, is a cutesy little robot who goes around collecting Earth garbage that is now completely covering the Earth to make these little cubes for reasons unknown. He's not really fixing the clutter problem, is he? But the feel of WALL-E is so almost magical in this sort of post-apocalyptic, awful, not magical way. What we see of the Earth after it's been trashed is so breathtaking. Like, we don't see anything like this in American movies. We just don't. And then we go out into space and see some of the most incredible animated scenes ever done. And the story is fresh. The characters are original, other than me always believing that WALL-E was Johnny Five's son. And we get so much out of this film with so few words. It's really a marvel that they could make a film like this. WALL-E is so layered and complex, and you've got the environmental message, but you've also got the fun aspect and the beauty aspect, and the immediate villain versus the overarching villain of By and Large. It even tackles obesity and media addiction, which was barely even a thing back in 2008. And I gotta tell you, this movie is so well done, I can hardly stand it. Alright, here it is, my number 1 ranked Pixar film. Have you guessed it yet? The Incredibles 2. This was a situation where the wait for the sequel was worth it. The movie picks up right where the first one leaves off, with the Underminer coming up and the Incredibles going into fight, and man, they give us such a good fight. But that also gets the government's attention, and the heroes are slapped down for not just standing by and doing nothing. However, Winston Devers catches the heroes in action and pulls them into his plan to make superheroes public again. Except, because of insurance and liability issues, he wants Elastigirl to be the solo hero that's put out in the public. I'm sorry, what? We're gonna do a film about a family where the mom is working, she's kick butt, she's in charge, and daddy has to stay home and take care of the kids to the best of his ability? I don't even care that that's similar to the plot of Mr. Mom. I'm all down for seeing how that goes. And the movie is wonderfully nuanced in different reactions you see, especially between between Helen and Bob, where Bob is clearly jealous and definitely struggling with the kids, but he still wants to support his wife and he has to keep it together so that she'll do what she needs to do for Heroes to become public again. And even though the kids were great in the last movie, getting to add in Jack Jack as all these different powers are blooming within him is just wowzers! And the movie gets a lot darker. The first screenslaver that they arrest, he actually tries to take off Elastigirl's arm with an axe. That's the kind of tension I want to see in a movie, not something that they force to work like a second death. And I really find Incredibles 2 to be fun, engaging, brilliantly animated, and expertly scripted, making it my #1 choice out of all the Pixar films. But we'll see if Incredibles 2 can keep its top spot after Toy Story 4 comes out this summer. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I might be overthinking it, but that's literally my job!
Fan mail, shout out. Fan mail, shout out.
I owe a shout out today to Neve, aka InfoSimmer, who sent me this gorgeous piece of fan art. I adore this. I agree. #in-glasses stereotypes. And Neve, if you're watching, and I think you are, hopefully, fingers crossed, please, please, please send me a message with your address so that way I can send you some love back. It's fine if it's international. I have international postage stamps. Anyways, thank you so much. I adore this. And thank you times a billion for watching and enjoying what I have to put out. And if you'd like to mail me something, I have my P.O. Box address on my main channel page in the About section. I'm not going to put it in the video in case it changes in the future, but it will be in the About section on my channel page on YouTube, so thank you! Well, that's all I have for now, but this video's not quite over yet. I get a lot of comments that say, do a theory on this topic, but I've already done those theories, so please consider going to my main channel page and clicking on the video tab so that way you can see everything I've done. You will probably find a lot of things you like that you never even knew that I posted. I want to let you know that I also have 2 other channels, Say Halo Goodbye Gaming and the Fanily Family Vlogs. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed enough to hit subscribe and share. I can use all the help I can get to let other people know that this channel exists. And if you made it this far, leave me a comment that says something like, hey, I made it to the end, and then let me know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. I can't make any promises, but the more people that request something, the more I can look into it. Okay, well, I love you. I'll see you in the next video.